this is something we will learn about today. I forgot to tell you that we will record the webinar. Like after 12 webinars, I always forget to tell you that we will record the webinar. So thanks for accepting the recording. Okay, and at the global level, many things have changed. Slowly and steadily, new PFAS are being added to the Stockholm Convention. We will learn about that also. But despite all this progress, we have learned also that the extent of PFAS pollution is really appalling. It's massive. In Europe, there are over 20,000 sites. Our colleagues from IPEN will tell us about their studies in other regions. And we found out recently that even pesticides have PFAS. And our colleague from PAN will tell us about this. So today we have the opportunity to learn about this with three women that are extraordinary. They are working closely on this topic. They are really experts in the topic. We will start with, I would just tell their names and then I'll give you a more in-depth presentation of each of them. We have Jitka Strakova from IPEN Arnica. We have Christine Herman from the EEB and Salome Roynel from PAN, who will tell us all the secrets of PFAS and tell us how we are all together going to ban PFAS and really commit to this I think mandate to our generation's mandate to protect future generations. So my time is over and I will give the floor now to Jitka Stratkova, who will start. You will present yourself, I believe. Sorry, 1 second. I'm making a mess. So my screen. Jitka is global researcher at IPEN. For many years, she has been connected with the Czech-based NGO Arnica. I believe many of you know about their studies on POPs. She is the author of many studies on PFAS in consumer products in the environment. And she will give a presentation on forever chemicals in food packaging, clothing, and water from the Global South. So
thank you very much, Dolores.
The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for your introduction. Yeah, so I will jump directly into the topic because our time is limited. So let me start with a very short introduction into the International Pollutants Elimination Network, IPEN, a global network of grassroots public interest civil society organizations in more than 100 countries. And my position in IPEN is a global researcher, and as Dolores introduced me, I am closely collaborating with IPEN participation organizations from Global South to conduct different studies on PFAS and persistent organic pollutants in products. Our role or our vision is to generate local scientific evidence to support efforts to prevent harm from chemicals and waste. We find it's crucial to work at local level with our participating organization, to collaborate with local grassroots groups who generate the knowledge, who generate the data. And the idea is to globalize local issues and local problems and then bringing back to local scale the well-working, well-established global policies. IPAN as a network surely has its secretariat, staff from different parts of the world, but we are sending most of our funding project and activities into the local regional hubs. And we are conducting different studies on POPs, heavy metals, endocrine disrupting chemicals, organizing capacity building, conducting laboratory analysis and surveys with the coordination with our POs, with our participating organizations. Since our establishment, we quite broadened the agenda. We started mainly to work on heavy metals and persistent organic pollutants, but now the agenda is much broader, and one of the key topics is the PFAS, perfluor alkyl substances known as forever chemicals. This nickname come from their very strong chemical bond between carbon and fluorine. This is one of the strongest chemical bonds in organic chemistry, which makes them very stable and persistent in the environment. This stability, together with the lipophilic and lipophobic part of the molecule, made them very attractive for different industrial and consumer use, because they work very well as surfactants. They create barrier against water, grease, and dirt. And for this property, they are widely used in many different consumer products. There are a very large group of chemicals, of many thousands of chemicals, depending on the definition, but the recent universal ban of PFAS in the EU talks about more than 10,000 chemicals. They include both polymeric and non-polymeric substances, and they are sometimes also divided into the groups of short and long-chain PFAS. First, industry tried to claim that only long-chain PFAS are being hazardous for the health and the environment, but more we learn, more we know that it's not true, that short chain PFAS are also sharing the concerns, and they are even more mobile than the long chain fellows of the same group. Three smaller groups of the large PFAS family are already banned globally by the Stockholm Convention, and this is PFOA, its salts and related substances, PFOS, its salts, again another smaller group, and since the last COP also PFHXS, its salts and related, and currently POPs review committee recommended long chain PFCAs, carboxylic acids and related substances also for the global ban. So next conference of the parties of the Stockholm Convention will negotiate about inclusion of this group of PFAS into the Annex A of the Stockholm Convention for the global elimination. We hope that without any exemption. As I said, PFAS are very attractive for different industrial and consumer uses because they are stable, they work as surfactants, they repel water, grease, and dirt. And for their properties, they are being used and still found in many different products, including cosmetics, food packaging, clothing, electronics, and much more. Due to their solubility in water, mobility, persistency, they can be found everywhere, from the raindrops to the ice sheets in Arctic, and unfortunately, they are also being detected in everyone. They are found in women's placenta, in our blood serum, in the blood or tissue tissues of Arctic animals, so even far from places of their manufacturing or use. Once PFAS entrants are manufactured or entrance the life cycle, they can be emitted or leaked or released to the environment. One of the main pollution sources of PFAS is PFAS manufacturing industry or industry using them as a surfactants in their products, but also different military areas and airports where firefighting foams with PFAS have been historically used. PFAS can be released from the products during their use. And unfortunately, diet and drinking water is being identified as the main exposure source of PFAS into the human organism. As I said, PFAS are also soluble in water, and commercial water treatment technologies do not fully distract PFAS in the water. So waste infrastructure, including wastewater treatment plants, are being contaminated with PFAS chemicals. As I said, entire group of PFAS are found to be highly persistent synthetic chemicals. They are bioaccumulative, they are accumulating in proteins in human and animal tissues, and basically continuous emissions mean increasing levels of PFAS in the environment. As I say, the more we learn about their impacts, the more concerning it is. And surely PFAS are also related to many different adverse health effects, including endocrine disruption, abilities, increased blood cholesterol levels, but also related to different cancers. And after this short intro, I will continue with the data which IPEN participating organizations collected. I will talk about PFAS in food packaging, in clothing, and also in surface water. The information, the content of the slides will be a bit more detailed than what I will comment. So you will be definitely offered to study my slides afterwards, but due to limited time, I will not dive that much into details. So in one of our recent studies, we looked into the PFAS content in different single-use disposable food packaging, because there are certainly concerns related to migration of PFAS from the food packaging into the food. And this adds definitely to existing concerns and negative effects of humans' exposures through the human diet. We looked at different paper, cardboard, and compostable food packaging from 17 different countries, from different regions: Asia, Africa, Europe, North America, and Latin America. Tested more than 100 items to illustrate that the practice, it's not isolated to one or the other countries, but it's global wide alarming situation, and we performed 2 types of laboratory analysis. We looked at the group of targeted PFAS. We were able to use 58 different standards to identify or to look if 58 PFAS are present in our samples, but we also looked at extractable organic fluorine content in our samples, which enables us to compare how much fluorine in the samples is being identified through the targeted PFAS analysis and how much PFAS stays unidentified. And for the study results, it's very clear that molded products made from sugarcane or wheat, which are being advertised as environmentally friendly alternative to plastics, is most heavily polluted by the PFAS chemicals. And at the second place of the highest concentrations of PFAS are microwave popcorn bags, followed by paper, fast food wrappers, and cardboard packaging. Cardboard packaging seem to be quite good alternative to other wrapping materials, because the dense material itself creates a good mechanical barrier against leaking of fat through the packaging. So we also find some good results and good news showing that there are many cardboard boxes not being treated by PFAS. And there are other sources of information. We made investigation into the microwave popcorn bags produced in the US and also sold in Indonesia. And our former study from the European Union also demonstrated that wide use of PFAS in food packaging is not practice isolated to global South countries, but it's also widely present in European countries. Yeah, and for more results, you can visit our study. Maybe last note, only 2% of PFAS positive samples extract can be linked with specific PFAS. So many PFAS chemicals stays unidentified, so we don't know their exact toxic concerns, and this definitely adds to concerns of consumers and civil society organizations. It's also clear that PFAS present in paper waste material can be recycled into the new products, which definitely pose a threat to circular economy and may overly decrease the credibility of recycling. And my last slide for this topic, PFAS treated and PFAS free wrapping are not having very harmonized policies, even not by the globalized fast food brands as a McDonald's. We identified that same or very similar types of packaging in different countries can be both PFAS treated or PFAS free. So there is inconsistency in PFAS use across countries. So there are key issues related to PFAS in disposable food packaging. There is potential to migration to food. Single-use products have high turnover rates, so we use these products for few minutes, and those chemicals stay in environment for forever. All stages of PFAS use are being connected to emissions, and PFAS use in paper food packaging creates barrier to clean and safe circular economy. So again, the sources and links for more materials. And with this, I will jump to the content of the second study into the PFAS use in different clothing. We again purchased different clothing items in several countries throughout Europe, Africa, Asia, and North America. More than 70 items were tested. There were mostly soft shell jackets, but due to their lower availability in Asian countries, we also included other dirt, stain, water repellent clothes in those countries, and again involved two-step analytic procedure looking into 58 specific PFAS and also into the total extractable fluorine. Again, majority of the studied items contained PFAS chemicals. Some of them had levels above the proposed EU limits in the universal REACH legislation. We identified even PFAS substances which are in final stage regulation, including PFOA, and a group of chemicals with highest concentration were fluorotelomere alcohols. The presence of fluorotelomere alcohols or also PFOA can be indication of the use of side chain fluorinated polymers in the products. And again, there are also some good news. Many products tested were free of PFAS. So similar to food packaging, there are alternatives in field in the market, and they are already in use. And these graphics should just help to explain how globally banned PFOA can be formed from side chain fluorinated polymers, which are used in textile. So side chains can be easily cut off from the polymer backbone of the chemical, and after a fluorotelomere alcohol of 8 carbon chain is being released from the backbone, this can be degraded into PFOA, which is globally banned PFAS chemical with many different health threats. And there are again key issues related and concerns related to PFAS content in clothing. First, clothing in contact with skins, which adds to concerns for consumers. Fluorotelomere alcohols presence in the clothing, volatiles from the materials. So in different studies, there were higher levels of FTOH identified in outdoor markets than other shops or markets. PFAS can migrate into the laundry water. PFAS are weathering from the products. They are again PFAS emission during the entire life cycle of the clothes. And again, links to our different reports and information sources. And with this, I am jumping to the last part of the study, which is looking into the presence of PFAS in surface water and drinking waters in Bangladesh, where we collaborated with excellent NGO ESDO. In the preliminary study in 2019, we collected surface and drinking waters, tap waters in Dhaka, capital of the Bangladesh. And then later, 1 year ago, we also collected surface water samples upstream and downstream from 5 different textile manufacturing locations in Dhaka, Bangladesh. We used very user-friendly testing method developed by Cyclopure, where you don't have to transport the water itself across the borders, but the PFAS from the water are being sorbed into the sorbent, which is then being shipped to the laboratory. So I can only recommend this quite simple testing methodology. And preliminary study results. Unfortunately, all surface water samples collected in 2019 were PFAS contaminated over the currently proposed limit in the European Union. And also tap water samples used as drinking water sources exceeded certain existing drinking water regulation thresholds. For the currently finalizing study, which will be released shortly, we tested 5 different locations in Dhaka. One of them was in the vicinity of Dhaka export processing zones. Those export processing zones are huge industrial area established for producing goods for exports, which are duty free. These are huge expanding hubs for textile production, and this one particular industrial establishment is unfortunately surrounded by rice paddies and wetlands, very popular recreational area with many different functions for Dhaka population. And we found elevated levels in surface water samples in the Ashulia Lake, which is downstream from the textile industry. The levels are significantly higher than upstream the source, showing that the textile industry in the export processing zones is the source of the PFAS into the environment. And we identified, among others, also PFOA, PFNA, PFDA, PFAS chemicals, which are in final stage or are already being restricted in the European Union, and some of the levels of PFOA are also exceeding the Netherlands advisory limits for surface water. The presence of some of the PFAS again can indicate use of side chain fluorinated polymers for better resistance of the textile. So again, those chemicals are being responsible for the content of the PFAS in the environment. So it's clear that textile production in Asia is the source of PFAS into the surface water. They have high potential for human exposure. Surely there are some limitations into the study. It's only a short snapshot in time, and we can test only 55 PFAS. We cannot look into the entire large group of PFAS chemicals, but unfortunately, the releases of PFAS from the textile industry are ongoing releases leading to accumulation of PFAS in the environment. And with this, I am finally turning into my final slides and key takeaway messages. So it's very clear that food packaging, clothing, textiles, are being sources of PFAS releases into the water and sources of human exposure to highly persistent PFAS chemicals. Already regulated PFAS are prevalent in different samples, and very large amounts of PFAS in our sample stays unknown because laboratories do not own analytic standards to look into broader group of PFAS chemicals. It's also very clear that there are viable and cost-effective alternatives in place and in use, and they are verified by the results. Side chain fluorinated polymers are obvious and important source of PFAS. It's clear that only effective control measure is to be banning PFAS by group to use class-based approach because we have been facing many unfortunate, regrettable substitutes in the past. Long chain PFAS were a substitute with short chain ones. Those were then being replaced by different polymeric structures of PFAS. So we need to look into the PFAS as a class because all are definitely bringing concerns, environmental concerns due to their high persistence. PFAS use in certain type of consumer products as a textile or food packaging can be restricted and banned immediately because there are alternatives at place. And what we definitely need to look at is to regulate PFAS use at source because PFAS manufacturing and PFAS using industries are the main polluters of the PFAS into the environment. And there are also methods at place, including total organic fluorine or total extractable organic fluorine, which are good method for policy enforcements. And there are certain key arguments for PFAS group restriction, including persistence, their irreversibility, the body burden is irreversible, and environmental contamination extremely challenging, impossible to reverse. The PFAS are already found everywhere and in everyone. And the third is the efficiency. We can wait for safety data for more than 10,000 PFAS chemicals and to be facing other regrettable substitution because more we learn about different PFAS, the more toxic they appear. And this was my final slide. I thank you very much for your attention. Sorry if I talked a bit longer than was announced. Sorry for that. I tried to be as fast as possible.
Thank you very much, Jitka. No, it was perfect timing. Congratulations for your work bringing science, policy, and advocacy together. There are some questions for you on the chat, and please raise your hand. I can read the questions that are for you in the chat, and then please raise your hand if you have more questions for Jitka. So there are two questions. One is, what was the instrument detectors type that you were using? I believe this was for the textiles, the water in the project measuring in Bangladesh, the PFAS.
Oh yeah, this is called Cyclopure. This is methodology developed in the United States. So the company can ship you PFAS sampling kits. This is a basic, very simple plastic cup which you pour into the water. You collect your water sample and then you leave to drain the water through the provided filter. This filter contains sorbent, and after dripping all the water through the filter, PFAS are being absorbed to the filter, and then you ship only the filter itself back to the laboratory who analyzes 55 individual PFAS chemicals. Yeah, so this is the sampling technology.
Okay, thank you. Perhaps the participant who raised the question wants to come back. In any case, he had a second question regarding wetlands. If you were saying that PFAS were being found in wetlands, and
Yes.
I invite I don't know the name, I just have the email of the person asking questions if you want to jump in.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I read the question. Yeah, so PFAS were identified in huge lake area called Ashulia Lake. This is a wetland area. This is a huge marshland. This is source of fish for Dhaka city. It also is big recipient of water during rainy season in Bangladesh. So it can it can accumulate large amounts of water, but the level of water is changing over the year. It's interesting bird nesting area and wetland area protected as one of the Ramsar sites. Yeah, so definitely site having different nature protection, social functions for not only Dhaka, but overall.
Okay, in case you don't see that chat, Biomada, I don't know, is the name of the email. Thanks you. Then we have another question.
This is me. I'm Dr. Madavi. Okay.
Okay, sorry. You want to ask any further questions? Then we have a question from Vidi Matura. I don't know if you want to open your mic. If not, I can read the question.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
I really enjoyed your presentation, Ritika. I just had a question. What are the current methods for removal of PFAS in, for example, surface water? So, for example, I'm in India. What can I recommend the government change or introduce if there are any new technologies that can remove PFAS from water? So, are there any?
Yeah, there are some. One of them is reverse osmosis. So it's not like unknown method for water treatment plants. It's not just widely used, but definitely some water treatment plants are already using this. Other types of methods are using activated carbon in different structures. So these are basically the two main ones, and definitely I can share some more detailed material for your reference. So feel free to email me. I can share my email address at kastrakova@ipen.org, and I will share the material.
All right. I have another question. So, what can be the proposed method of reducing our exposure to PFAS, especially in, for example, food packaging material? Because from what I see, I come from an NGO. We need to propose certain measures that others can adopt. So, what are the measures that we can ask people to adopt to reduce their exposure of PFAS? I mean, in India, we don't really have any labels that can let us know if something has PFAS. So what do you think about that?
For me, it's mainly to get rid of disposable single-use food packaging. So basically, use inert material boxes which we can bring from our homes to the restaurants. So glass containers or metal containers made of stainless steel. So basically reduce the use of single-use packaging, which is overall not that much environmental friendly for many reasons. The other option is quite simple, do-it-yourself method for identifying PFAS in the wrapping, but you can basically use little pipette and drop little droplet of olive oil or any other oil on the surface of the food packaging and observe if very regular bead is being formed on the surface of the paper, because due to physical chemical properties of PFAS, very regular bead is being formed, which is quite good illustration of PFAS content in the sample. If there is any other barrier being used, some plastic or something else, the bead will spread on the surface, maybe not leak through, but being spread. And this is clear that there is some other chemical or mechanical barrier in the material. So yeah, we can use this simple method, but I would say overall get rid of single-use paper food packaging and be using reusable food containers instead. But the regulation must come on
Yeah.
also from the top. I don't sure we have power. Our demands are changing the markets, and producers and manufacturers change their behavior according our demands. But I still believe that regulation must come and speed up the process. In one of our earlier studies, we tested also McDonald's wrappers from 3 European countries, and in 2 of them, elevated concentrations of PFAS were present, but in the packaging from Denmark, the only European country where universal ban of PFAS is food packaging is in place, McDonald's was using PFAS-free packaging alternative, and the other 2, there were elevated concentrations of PFAS. This is very good illustration of the fact that the policy is the best incentive to move the change.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so thank you very much for the questions. Thank you so much, Jitka, for the presentation and the questions. We're going to move to the next presentation because we are a bit late, but please feel free to keep asking questions to Jitka through the chat, and then we will open the floor later for questions also after Christine's presentation. So now we have my dear colleague Christine Herman, who will present the European PFAS initiatives and our activities. Christine is environmental engineer. She also holds a master's on risk assessment. She is working very hard to restrict PFAS in Europe and following closely the discussion, the technical scientific discussions at European Chemical Agency's committees. And she's also coordinating NGO activities on PFAS. So I don't think we can have a better speaker for the topic. So the floor is yours, Christine.
Thank you so much, Dolores, and hello everyone. Thanks for having me, and thank you, Jitka, also for the great introduction. I think that kind of like makes the perfect transition to my topic. And I divide my presentation today in 2 parts. This would be on the one hand giving you a bit of an overview of what is happening on the regulatory side on PFAS in the EU, and then later tell you a bit more what we do with other NGOs on this topic of restricting PFAS. So to summarize a bit what Jitka already kind of like gave us a good image of is like the PFAS issues that we see emerging in the EU especially, but also globally, is that we see PFAS are being used in so many sectors and uses and sub-uses that we do lose track of where they are everywhere. And at the same time, we see continued production and use and emission, which means there's more and more PFAS building up in the environment. We call it the environmental stock. And that also goes into the food chain, which we will hear later more about, also from Salome. We also see that it's not only in the environment where PFAS are accumulating, but also in humans. And there are quite some good studies now that document this better. One was the very famous PFAS pollution project. You see in the background of the top left a bit these many blue and red dots. They are documentation of pollution in Europe, which are more than 20,000 confirmed spots which have elevated PFAS contamination, and 20,000 more which are estimated to have high levels of PFAS. And also in humans, we know that there are PFAS levels increasing. There was the so-called Human Biomonitoring Project, which documented this and showed it's concerning what we see, the elevated levels throughout different age groups in our society. And at the same time, we as NGOs who work on this are very aware of the issue, but in the general public, we do still face a lack of public awareness. And therefore, we need more awareness and more pressure for policymakers to act. When we think about what we can do from the regulatory point of view, we saw that the European Commission thought about different ways to approach this on the regulatory action. And in the right, you see a bit what also was earlier depicted, the different areas where PFAS are used. In the slightly red or pink background, you see what the Central European Chemical Law, the REACH regulation, can cover. But many other areas are also affected, such as drinking water, groundwater, waste aspects. So all these different areas can be addressed by different regulations. So on the one hand, we see chemical legislation, such as REACH, which is kind of a horizontal topic that covers different areas. Then we also see non-chemical legislations addressing different, more specific areas. And there are also opportunities to address non-legislative initiatives. So, for example, improving standards for testing or increasing funds to address the remediation issues, etc. So the EU had different ideas, but we also, of course, want to know what they actually do in these areas. And I will focus a bit more on the chemical legislation, as this is the core field where we look into now. So globally, there is a chemical regulation in place that addresses PFAS, which is the Stockholm Convention. And as Jitka mentioned earlier, there are some substances already covered under this. But in Europe specifically, this is implemented through the POPs regulation. So it kind of like transfers just the global action into European action. Besides this, there's, as I mentioned, REACH as the central chemical law. And under REACH, there are different possibilities to address risks of chemicals that we identify to be problematic. One of them being the so-called restriction process, which we'll look into in a moment further. Besides that, there are also opportunities to declare or to clarify which concerns we see in certain chemicals under so-called classification and labeling. So this is less about taking concrete measures, but more identifying and confirming concerning properties. And as I mentioned earlier, there are also product and sector legislation, which we'll not have the time now to dig deeper into, but which is also relevant for Salome's topic later. So looking into the REACH regulation and the process of restrictions, it's not that we start the first time addressing PFAS under this process, but we've seen several examples. So this green process outlines a bit the process, how it advances when you start from the idea of restricting a chemical or a group, and then at the very end, bring this into force. And on the bottom right side, you see some chemicals which were first undergoing this process, like PFOS, PFOA, and others, and which were then moved towards a POP regulation. Some other PFAS groups, such as PFHXA, are now in the process being restricted. And we see with this time, we started with single substances, moved on to subgroups, but now we see, as it was mentioned before, regrettable substitution in many areas. So this is why there was identified to be a need to have now a universal restriction of PFAS. And what this actually means, universal, is quickly summarized as being a ban to manufacture, use, and place PFAS on the market in chemicals, in substances, as a substance itself, or in articles. And so this is a quite broad ban of more than 10,000 substances, which are identified under the chosen OECD definition. There were different options considered how to approach this. One would have been to go straight forward, directly ban after adoption the whole use, etc. But this was considered to be a bit too drastic. So what is discussed right now is here highlighted in yellow, the restriction option 2, which means we need a ban with some use-specific derogation. And the derogation means basically there is a prolonged period for which you can use it, but after that, in this meantime, you need to move away from it, because then after some time, it will also be banned. So it's usually not a permanent exemption. And they chose that 5 or 12 years are the proportionate transition periods to allow for some uses to be a bit prolonged. And only for very few cases, there is an unlimited time allowed to continue the use of PFAS. So we talked about PFAS being used in many areas, and if we say many, we mean many. So this is a rough overview of how they tried to group a bit the uses of PFAS. And some of them are a bit better researched already, and some are more unknown. And right now, the approach of how to analyze all this information in the current restriction process is that they use 15 sectors, and they go sector by sector, looking into how many volumes of PFAS go in there, what type of PFAS, what is the function, etc., to then assess based on the sector if there are suitable alternatives, and for example, how costly they are, and if there are derogations needed. And the PFAS, as mentioned earlier, can be divided in subgroups, and there are three main subgroups, which is on the one hand the PFAS and their precursors. Then we have the fluorinated gases, so this is a PFAS gas group, and the polymeric PFAS. And we see that it's very unevenly distributed among these three sectors. So that we see the biggest emission actually comes from fluorinated gases, which is a sector we don't talk about very often, but which is very relevant. And yeah, we still lack a lot of information on certain uses, but we do see already from the data that we have that there is great concern. So to give you a bit of an idea where we are in this restriction process right now, we have a little timeline, and I hope it's not too overwhelming, the details. So we started last year in January. The proposal for how to restrict this whole group of PFAS was submitted to the European Chemicals Agency. Since then, the expert committees at the agency started looking into the details, what information we have, how credible they are, etc. There was an opportunity for the public to submit information to this process, which is now taken into account when moving forward with developing an opinion on this proposal. So right now we had in October one sector being discussed the first time, food contact material and packaging, which is very relevant, what also Jitka presented earlier. Then we had now in March 3 further sectors being addressed. Also sectors which are very common use sectors like PFAS and ski wax in cosmetics and in consumer mixtures. So it's very like consumer focused areas. And in June, we have one more sector being addressed, which is, oh, it's a bit bumpy here. In June, we have one more sector. But if you remember, we have 15 sectors, and each of them has to be discussed at least 2 or 3 times to update the discussion. So we see it's a very lengthy process, and we don't know exactly the timelines yet for the next steps to come. So we expect that hopefully throughout the next year, they will come to an end with analyzing the sectors and then developing an opinion in this, which then will be passed on to the actual decision makers. But this means we see it's still a few years to come likely to actually regulate PFAS. So it is good if we see already some activities like in France or in Denmark that was mentioned, if they advance further on certain uses of PFAS to be restricted. Some reflections from our side maybe is that we are overall rather content with the approach because it is very wide and very holistic, the approach. But of course, some of the derogations, for example, we see rather critical, especially the one also, which later maybe Salome will talk a bit more about, for example, for active substances in plant protection products, etc. Then we also see that in the restriction process, it's rather balanced, that the industry is not so active there. But of course, they're present in the discussion room itself. But the main discussion takes place outside these expert committees. And we are very happy with how the rapporteurs, that the experts in the group that presented their opinion to the group, that they do a good job. So it's not mainly on us to defend the strong arguments, but also they do a very good job in analyzing. In the bigger picture, on the other side, what I said is that we see immense lobbying from industry. So they are very present in media, in discussions, in events, to present their ideas about the restriction, and this would be much too strict, or this would cause very much damage for industry. So outside this expert committees, we see a lot of discussion. And we also see some policymakers already starting to have their own ideas and opinions about this, but we're of course not very happy with, because they shouldn't be involved so early in the process, and especially they should be on civil society side. So to share a bit what civil society represented through NGOs is doing on PFAS, I will give you some insights on that. So some overviews is that we are working in a coalition together. So this is not only single NGOs working all by themselves, but yeah, we have a strong network. We regularly, every 2 weeks, meet and exchange about the progress of the file, what we can do, what activities we plan. And yeah, we share our knowledge and give each other updates. We also strategize a bit together, for example, which arguments are strongest, which ones to bring forward, in which group of people we want to address, and have some special meetings, for example, when it comes to discussing analytical methods or legal cases or some specific topics. Then we also want to work on how the whole restriction is perceived, so on the narrative that's behind it. So not leaving the whole stage to industry and their view on things, but instead also working on debunking some fakes or fake information, and trying to also limit the opportunities for industry to spread their narrative by trying to create some rules. Where can they actually participate and where not? And also towards the public, we do participate in lots of events. We do capacity building, such as today, but also in other occasions, to share the knowledge among each other and share strong arguments, and also invest in awareness raising to make the public more aware, because they are, of course, super affected. And we also consider, if hopefully possible, to promote, also develop more PFAS documentaries to make this more accessible through, for example, images and movies. Then further activities, I mentioned earlier in the process, there's the opportunity to submit information in a so-called public consultation. And this one received outstanding numbers of comments, much more than before. And of course, in the overview of the share, it looks little, but I think 61 submissions from NGOs is already quite a good number. So to mobilize NGOs to not only submit like their opinions, but actual information, and invest the time and expertise and bring all what they know together to improve the process with better knowledge. Then further, also part of our work means we advocate sources of alternatives, because that's of course a relevant aspect. If we say we don't want PFAS, but certain products still need to have certain functions, we talk also about what alternatives there are. And also, if you are interested in alternatives, you can find them in the restriction dossier itself, because the member states who prepared it did a very good job at collecting information on that. Then also our fellow NGO ChemSac has a tool called Marketplace, which provides lots of information. But also they have a movement, for example, called No PFAS, which entails many companies and organizations that want to move with their products and their users away from using PFAS. So if you have great front runners, you can of course also exchange expertise and experience with them. Besides that, we also have academic and technical institutes that work on alternatives, but also, of course, talking among actors in the supply chain and value chain helps a lot identifying better alternatives. And I think also, as for example, Jitka presented their report, it shows that there are products which do no longer entail PFAS. So we see alternatives can work. Then another part of our work is work in the media. So, for example, we do try to be present also in the press that policymakers reach, but of course also to reach the general public, which means, for example, through radio or participating in events, being present in social media, and also promoting petitions which actually reflect the public interest to see a change in the PFAS landscape and regulating it. Then on the very technical part in the process that I presented to you earlier, we are present as stakeholders. So the image gives you a very physical idea of how it looked in these expert committees when they meet and exchange about the file. And we are there present as so-called observers. So we are a bit the watchdog of the process, trying to hold everyone accountable of their role, and maybe also having a balanced view, taking also NGO arguments sufficiently into consideration, etc. But also, of course, we inform other NGOs of how the process is going, how they can participate to keep the information flow there. Then we also bring along great experts, and we are very blessed and lucky that we have the Global PFAS Science Panel, which is really a high-level group of experts on PFAS on our side to support us, to exchange with, and to have their expertise in this. And so we sometimes ask them to come along to in person present their arguments, because of course this is a very strong support in such an expert room. We also engage actively in the discussion and try to present our arguments, and also we exchange with the members of these committees to better understand what their concerns are, how their argumentation works, etc. And this is our role in the stakeholders in these committees. And to summarize a bit our position on this, it's of course very broad, but saying we have this proposed broad restriction, and although there is like a huge amount of information being submitted, which takes a long time to assess, and despite the complexity of the topic, we do see a strong need to move on with this process and to make it a successful case for restricting this broad group, despite the lobbying pressure, and to see that the committees, the civil society, and everyone can work together on moving this big piece forward. And also on the question of phasing out PFAS, we do see the strong need to so-called close the tap, because someone asked again earlier about what remediation techniques are there, and we can try to have the best remediation techniques. We will not manage to keep up with the level of emission if we continue using them as before. So we need to close the tap before wiping the floor. Then we also saw that there is a success story in the past from moving from single to group restrictions, and now this is a good opportunity to have this huge group restriction. It's a precedent case, but it can be a successful one. We need to focus on the alternatives rather than on the derogations, so try to promote them as much as we can. And we need to hold industry accountable on this one to become leaders and not laggers in this process. And we also want to highlight, of course, always the benefits and how PFAS restriction can boost innovation and promote safe alternatives. And maybe jump the next slide, because it's not exactly like, it's not super, like we promote the essential use concept, but it's not a key one in the process itself, but maybe to highlight it from a past process. So we did see this concept being applied in the Montreal Protocol, and we think it is really relevant for us as a society to think about when we have a group such as PFAS, do we actually need this function that it provides? So is it really necessary? And if alternatives are available, we should really move away from it. So this is something that we promote as a decision basis, although it is unfortunately not yet really implemented in the process. But it's still a long way to go for us. So we'll see how the decision base will evolve. And that comes to an end of my presentation. And if there are any questions, feel free. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christine. You already have several questions in the chat. So we start with Ahmad. I don't know if you want to make the question yourself. Ahmad Madavi from Iran. If not, he's asking about the timelines, if these timelines are also outside the EU or only for Europe for the restriction.
Okay, so the restriction itself is focused on the EU because it's EU law, the REACH regulation, but it also addresses imports and exports. So if we are no longer allowed to produce PFAS in the EU, this will of course also affect the international level. But on the other hand, of course, also the imports. So this will also apply to those. So in that sense, it affects outer EU countries. But we do see, for example, on the OECD level, when we had recently an event in exchanging, that the EU is, with this approach right now, the front runner. So we don't see the same level of ambition outside the EU. So there is like no global ban of PFAS right now discussed. And I think other stakeholders, other countries are waiting a bit to see how it works in the EU and how it progresses to then make up their minds maybe to also move forward. But it's not the only initiative. Also outside the EU, there are some single aspects which are just about PFAS, but I think the EU is the front runner here.
Thank you. Also, Francois Nabufu is asking how, well, she's commenting that she hopes we can come out of the workshop with possible solutions. I'll copy paste the link to ChemSec's website on alternatives, but I don't know if you would like to comment on this.
Yeah, I think when we talk about solutions, there are different understanding of what a solution is. And of course, for example, when we talk about remediation, this is sometimes considered as solutions, but we know that this cannot actually be a solution because we cannot fully eliminate PFAS usually, for example, from soil contamination, etc. So the only actual solution can only be the full restriction of PFAS because of the ban of PFAS, because that means we no longer continue emission of this already existing environmental stock. And so we need, I showed earlier this picture of different angles of PFAS of the lifetime. So we need to address it through different regulations as well. So addressing waste, addressing water, addressing food regulation, addressing chemical regulation. So this is our view on what we can do and we can promote as a result and as a solution.
In the chat, Aisha Mamam is also saying that the introduction of ecological alternatives to farm chemicals is very important. Yeah, so it's more systemic alternatives, no? Moving away from chemicals.
Indeed. So alternatives, when we talk about them, it's not always replacing one chemical with an exact same one that has similar properties, but we can also think about restructuring a product, thinking about the need of this function at all, or rethinking the system, how we can use it. So you're absolutely right there.
And we have a hand raised, I believe. Phoebe, did you raise your hand? Good afternoon.
Yes, May Dolores, thank you very much. I want to greet everybody and thank the presenters for a wonderful presentation. And all the presentations are so good, and it's very new to me personally and to our work. It's the first time hearing it, and it's really amazing to be able to learn something new for the very first time. Well, I would like to ask a question to both the presenters, because here I have the opportunity to work in a lab in our school, and we are open for research. And since this is the very first time we are hearing about these forever chemicals, I don't know if it is possible, like Francois said, to come up with possible solutions, which I'm proposing, like starting to test some of these materials in Cameroon, maybe from the lab. I don't know. They also have some opportunities in Yaoundé they can test, and then we can begin to assess the situation of forever chemicals in Cameroon together with WICA. And then maybe we are sure that maybe in 2 months' time, we can have a concrete background and maybe then develop a research program or something, a basis of action for it.
Well, I can jump into the answer. I think it's an excellent idea, and I see already some exchanges between Michael from Zambia and Yitka. So as Yitka's here, our lab expert, it would be great if you could ask her about the testing, how they do it. It seems to be quite simple testing, but it would be great to extend the knowledge about the PFAS contamination to more regions and to more countries in Africa. So it's a great idea, and yeah, I think please contact Jitka through the chat. We will share all the slides as after the webinar, and there you will also find the contact. Here Jitka already included. And I believe, sorry, I'm have a bit mess with my screen, but I believe there was another hand raised. Francois, did you
Yes,
raise your
Francois.
hand?
Yes,
Sorry. Please.
Thank you. For me, it's just a wonderful workshop, and I sincerely want to thank you. For the past month, you've been calling on us, register, 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 and it is really, really an excellent one. And I want to say that we've been talking about pesticides, chemicals with farmers. Here, I see a larger group that comes in. So if in Cameroon, we are working with farmers, we are limited. With PFAS, there are a lot of people that have entered into agro-transformation. They're transforming these agricultural products that already have pesticides. And when they finish transforming these products, most of them, the packaging they use, that is what we are talking on today. You see, we have to extend our work into these agro entrepreneurs. And I'm talking because I've been talking here about, I don't know, those that have been with us for the past years. I've been talking here about how my organization is involved in also a food transformation where we use a dehydrator and a dehydrator. That is why we are so much into transfer. And then I was pleading here for the use of a bow digester, which is going to generate organic fertilizer and biogas for the work we are doing. Here we are really seeing a larger group, and there is something that Jitka said. I don't know how many people picked it. I picked it because I've been working with it, especially encouraging women that are faced with these products that come to the market with chemicals. That is activated charcoal. She mentioned activated charcoal. I've been teaching women activated charcoal, but I keep telling them I don't have a literature that has proven its efficacy. But I know that activated charcoal is very, very good to neutralize poisons and chemicals. So I teach them how to use activated charcoal after buying their products from the market. And so that is one area I would really like to work with Jitka. If there's some literature reviews concerning that, it really boosts what I'm doing as a scientist and as a researcher. You don't just talk, but you talk with some evidence. Let it be more evidence-based. So that's why I said this workshop today, as if it was for me and for the work I'm doing. So I'm super excited. And then from what you were saying, actually, for example, when I want to transform pap, I soak my corn with activated charcoal because I don't know what they use in preserving that corn before I buy it. But that's not the case with the others because they don't know. So we need to sensitize the other people that are doing food transformation, food packaging. A lot of work should go to that area as well. So I'm just excited. So I was trying to say that, for example, when I'm soaking, I soak with this because I know what it does. But when I come now to the packaging, when she was talking about testing the packaging, I said, oh my God, how do I get in contact with this organization? Maybe packaging would be another issue where we have. That's why I said the African context. You remember, I wrote something on the platform. I said the African context, because we are limited in many things. And now the message is really needs to carry sensitization message to these people that are transforming food. Thank you. Sorry for taking long. I'm not presenting, but I'm talking as if it's because I'm so passionate about what is being said here today. And when I say I hope we'll come up with solution, because there is work to be done in that area. There is so much work to be done in this area. When I was presenting last time on the EEB, when I was presenting, I think I remembered I said I buy my sweet potatoes from a particular locality because I know they don't grow with pesticides. But how many people are patient to say that, oh, this place where I buy, they don't have? I have to wait or to train them. So please, as we finish this, I know there are many Africans here. We really want to go back home with some solutions, with some proposals, with some with something to tell our people that is in both the farmers and the those that are transforming these foods. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone.
Thank you very much, Francois. I think your comment links very well with the next presentation from Pesticides Action Network about PFAS and pesticides. But I don't know if Jitka, you want to give a short answer to. I think everything is like in Europe. Everything needs to be done about PFAS. Well, we are a bit more advanced, but in Africa, I think this is something quite new. It's great that IPEN is starting to test there. We have here Michael telling us that they want to test in Zambia, so also Cameroon. So if it would be great if out of this project we can build a bit more networks between people wanting to work on PFAS and PFAS testing and see how we can build synergies and share resources there. I don't know, Jitka, you want to say something before we welcome?
Yeah, I only agree. I just wanted to offer networking with other Anglo and Francophone NGOs. We do have like regional hubs in both Francophone and Anglophone Africa. Many countries in the region facing similar problems. So lessons learned can be shared among countries. So please feel free to contact me. I can share the information I have, and then the next phase, the next follow-up would be networking with the others and sharing the knowledge and specifics of each of the regions.
Thank you, Jitka. Thank you, Christine. And now we join Salome in the conversation, but don't go away because there are always questions coming back to both of you. So Salome is policy officer on pesticide risk assessment at the Pesticides Action Network Europe, who is a network that unites 48 member organizations from 28 countries. Many of you know PAN from working in different regions. In Europe, they strive to eliminate hazardous pesticides, reduce dependency on pesticides, and promote ecological sound alternatives to chemical pest control. So Salome is going to present us the report about, it's called Toxic Harvest, the rise of forever PFAS pesticides in fruits and vegetables in Europe. So now we are linking the work we have been doing in the last years on pesticides with PFAS. So Salome, the floor is yours.
Sorry, Salome, I just wanted to clarify in the end if you want to share yourself or...
No, you can do it. Thank you, Naomi.
Okay, and I only have the PDF version, so it doesn't look like perfect. So, but as you want, I can still...
Let me do it in that case.
Okay, sorry.
Salome, I can share the slides if you want.
It's okay. Can you see it now?
No.
Okay. Apologize to everyone. Yes,
Yes, now it works.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, everyone. First for narrowing it down to pesticides, because I feel like this is a use of PFAS that we are very little aware compared to others. And thank you to my two colleagues that have perfectly well introduced the topic. So I will directly dive into the subject. And yeah. So yeah, first of all, so you have heard that PFAS chemicals are very successful as surfactants. So for a while, we had this suspicion that maybe PFAS were added to the pesticide formulation, but we had no possibility to substantiate that suspicion because of a lack of data. And this is only when we had this proposal for EU restriction of PFAS that Christine has been introducing to you, that we had further confirmation that some coformulants or surfactants were added to pesticide products, but also that the active substances, so the chemicals that are acting or activating the biocidal action of the product, were PFAS themselves. And also we had a full list, first official list of those active substances that were PFAS. So something else that Christina mentioned is that there were a few ban derogation for PFAS, including what they have called time unlimited derogations, and it applies to pesticides. So what it means is that the EU is not planning with its restriction to ban PFAS if there are active substances in pesticides. And the rationale behind it is partly that these substances are handled by a specific regulation, which is the pesticide regulation. And indeed, pesticide active substances are individually assessed and authorized according to strict approval criteria. And namely, they should have no harmful effect on human health, on animal health, and no unacceptable effect on the environment. And everything should be underpinned by the precautionary principle. So the reason we decided to look into it, because it was a new area of work for Pan-Europe, is that first I refer to the general concern we heard about regarding PFAS. And so persistence, human health concerns, emission into the environment, widespread pollution. But also there are some specificities to the PFAS process in pesticide. First, pesticides are products that are directly, intentionally spread on food crops. And this is also an easily avoidable source of PFAS pollution, in the sense that they represent one part of the synthetic pesticide products that we have on the market, but there were way more of them. And also we can also grow crops without using synthetic pesticides. And also when investigating, we also realized that the EU has no intent to address the problem of PFAS pesticide under the pesticide regulation. So what would happen is that unless we were asking for it, PFAS pesticide would not be banned in the EU, contrary to the EU pledge to ban all PFAS. So what we looked at on our main research question, why are some PFAS pesticides? So what is the function of PFAS in pesticides? How toxic are those PFAS pesticides? What is the exposure of EU citizens and the environment to these substances? How is it that they were authorized under the pesticide regulation while it requires no harmful effect on human health and no unacceptable effect on the environment? And how can we get them banned? So what is our policy recommendation? So how we work is that first we have to build knowledge, because as I mentioned, it's a new area of work. And one way we did it is that we connected, we were already in contact with our sister chemical organization, but we started discussing with other expert organizations in this field, also with scientists. And we also created a network of allied organization among our member organizations that work specifically on pesticides. So to build knowledge, but also to narrow down to national level the action we would carry out. And we did first, our first approach was to focus on the data we had, because on pesticides, we have many more data than on other chemicals. So we have pesticides dossier for the authorization, where we could find information on their toxicity. We have, in some member states, national state data. And we also have a program to monitor the presence of their residues in food. So what we did is that we looked into all this data, and we published so far 2 reports about it. And I will summarize the findings now. So first, when looking into the dossier, what we saw was a confirmation that although PFAS pesticides are out of the scope of the ban, and although they are short-chain PFAS, they are hazardous chemicals that should be banned. First, the substance or their degradation products or persistence. And what we saw is that PFAS pesticides are also a specific subgroup of PFAS that form TFA, so trifluoroacetic acids, which is a very concerning chemical that pollute highly water sources. And we also observed that there was a large spectrum of proven of suspected toxicity concern with regard to those substances. Last, we also found out that the use of PFAS as active substances obviously was the outcome of a chemical design that was intentional on the industry side, and that it was meant to increase mostly the stability of the substance. So the idea is that they would last longer in the field, and this is what makes them obviously so persistent. Second point is that we can see that citizens and the environment are exposed to these PFAS pesticides, and current trends seems to suggest that this exposure is increasing. So what we looked at is first the sales, and we saw that in several member states where those data are available, namely in Belgium, France, and the Netherlands, sales are increasing. And so we have published those results together with member organizations that we got active on this topic. And more recently, I will dive into it in a second, we have also revealed that the exposure of European citizens through PFAS pesticides is increasing via their diet. Last, we also concluded that further policy action is needed to get PFAS pesticide banned. So what does it mean? It basically means that without any action, if we leave things as they are, PFAS pesticides will keep being authorized, and because the regulation is poorly implemented. So our main policy recommendation is that the persistence of this substance, so the common properties of all this substance is to be better regulated for all synthetic pesticides. So I will jump more into the content of one of our recent report. So for which we analyzed the data of member states on the presence of residues of PFAS pesticide in fruit and vegetables. So we did it based on official data, so this enabled us to have a strong credibility regarding our results. So what we saw is that out of the 37 PFAS pesticides that are authorized in the EU, 31 were detected, and that in a 10-year period, the detection of these substances has been multiplied by 3. So this is a significant increase. And this leads us to very high contamination rates and cocktail risks today. So I have put a few images. You can see that it's pretty impressive for summer fruits, and that strawberries, peaches, and apricots are the most affected products. Then we also looked at where those PFAS pesticide products were like contaminated products, sorry, were grown. So when it comes to the EU, we have identified the Netherlands, Belgium, Austria, Spain, and Portugal as the leading producers of PFAS contaminated foods. But we also looked into the import, and we saw that the most contaminated products in this respect came from Costa Rica, India, and South Africa. Something also interesting for you is that we looked at the detected PFAS substances, and that those were pretty much the same in imported products than in EU-grown products, and that imported products were not more contaminated than EU-grown ones. So the average level of contamination was similar in them. And yeah, just to say that raising awareness on the toxicity of some substances and their presence in our daily life is always working very well when you focus on residues in food. This is something the public and the media are very sensitive to. So also they are very sensitive to or very aware now of the topics of PFAS, and this seems to be resonating with them. So we had a very nice media coverage, which helped us raising awareness in different member states, in different languages. And yes, all this work we are carrying out at a campaigning level to raise awareness is meant to put pressure on policymakers, both at European level, which is the level of action of Pan-Europe, and also at national level, since we work with our member organization. And so what we heard recently is that EU-wide, there were some member states that are pushing the European Commission to get our competent agency to look into what can be done regarding PFAS pesticides and how we could address their presence under the pesticide regulation. So they also are just reflection, but it's already a good step, a step in the right direction, considering nothing was foreseen at first. And just to give another example, in France, which is a country where we have been the most active so far, the French authorities have been updating their action plan against PFAS to use an explicit reference to pesticides as a use. And there is a commitment to support any EU-wide action to get the substance further restricted or ideally banned. So that's it. Just to say that this has become now an area of work for Pan-Europe, and that we will further raise awareness on the presence of PFAS in pesticides, and that we will keep carrying out projects in the EU with our member organization. Our next project in the pipeline is actually to now produce data by testing both surface and drinking water. And we will test specifically so what I have called before TFA, so trifluoroacetic acid, which is so a degradation product of all PFAS pesticides that for now its emission into the environment is mostly attributed to F-gases uses. And we also want to raise awareness on the fact that pesticides are a source of emission of this concerning compound. And yeah, we will also further spread and expand our work on the residue analysis in food. So thank you for listening to me. I invite you to check out our work because we have also other materials. For instance, we had to publish an article to debunk the pesticide industry claimed that pesticides, PFAS, are safe. And you can always contact me by email. I will be happy to discuss with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Salome. So we have linked the PFAS and pesticides work, which is important because in this group there's a lot of NGOs working on both the topics. So I'll start by giving the floor to Ahmed, who has been very patient, waiting to take the floor. Ahmed, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Ila. I absolutely understand, and of course, I must commend very interesting and inspiring presentation by all the presenters. Thank you very much. It's been very useful. I just want to go back to the last comment about the beat testing. I think it might be very empowering for many colleagues on the call. I remember we did this with FIDRA last year, and it was really basic that many people within our network was able to, do this, in different locations and to collect basic data of presence of PFAS in food packaging. I think it's basic and it's easy to also raise awareness in grassroots communities because most of the sachets for packaging that most people are coming in contact with every time. These are found, PFAS are found in them, and it can be easy for people to also be able to relate with and local authority to understand some of these because this is something that really, really need to be advocates about and to be able to protect and safeguard people's health and environment from their impacts. Just wanted to flag that, and of course, happy to find more collaboration for people and around the work in PFAS and pesticides, and some of these to get local data to also support our work and advocate better with the government. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ahmed. So, Rico, you have the floor. Please feel free to open your video if you want.
Thank you so much, Dolores, and thank you so much, Salome, for a very useful presentation. And thank you to all the other presenters also. I think this is a really good topic that all of us can benefit from. The question I have to you specifically, and it's also a campaigning kind of suggestion, is that if these chemicals are to be banned in the EU, and there is a strong campaign and a strong drive to highlight their presence in EU imported fruit and vegetables from the global south, then we can work together on a joint campaign to also begin the process to highlight that these are the chemicals that are being used in South Africa, that the demand to use those chemicals or the demand to phase those chemicals out is going to be coming from the EU, and that if our industry is not quick to adapt and not quick to look for alternatives, then potentially they're going to lose out on a big economic windfall. I think we have to have these bi-directional campaigns. We have to have bi-directional and collective campaigning so that we can put pressure at both ends of the PFAS kind of spectrum. I would be very willing and open to think about that. And also the people that I work with in South Africa would also be very willing to participate in that kind of a campaign. So my question is, have PAN and your partners working on PFAS, have you begun to think about how this might happen? To maybe frame it also as a kind of a double standards campaign, that workers that are using these chemicals in the global south are disproportionately exposed because they don't have the same level of control, the same level of oversight, compliance, enforcement, for example, but that the European consumer is still going to be exposed through the food that they eat because of the residues on the imported food. I really do think there's a lot of merit for us to think about it in this kind of way. Thank you.
Thank you, Rico, for this very valuable comment. Actually, this relates to another area of work of Pan Europe. We indeed are fighting double standards once pesticides are banned in the EU. So we have indeed some organization also working with external, like EU external organization on this, and I will try to connect the dots in this respect. But when it comes to PFAS pesticides, it's true that we have been focusing EU-wide so far, since those substances are still approved. But yeah, to be reflected on. I think this makes a lot of sense, and that we should get in touch after the workshop.
Thank you. Well, during this webinar, we are finding many good ideas to keep working together, to network. So let's be sure that we do have the contacts. All of us have all our contacts. The ones that are interested in working on pesticides, please look at the links I posted there, the link to the report by Salome and the webpage of Pan Europe on that topic, and there we can copy paste here Salome's email, and let's discuss in our network how we can engage more on this. And especially, I think it's very important that those in Africa take note of the IPEN contacts in Africa that Jitka has been sharing in the chat, so you can network with them. Okay, I don't know if there's more questions. If not, we can start with the closure. This is the last webinar of the program, but this doesn't mean that we will disappear. We are very persistent NGO at the EEB, so we will keep inviting you to participate at the webinars we organize or our members organize. If you think we are too persistent, you just have to tell us to exclude you from our mailing list, and but we hope that you want to keep connected. You can also check our website for events. But before closing, I just wanted to tell you that it has been incredible that we organized, that you were patient and interested enough to participate in 12 webinars. We have covered chemicals and gender issues, chemicals and children. We have covered pesticides, plastics, databases, how to network, we had presentations from RICO, from Griffins, very interesting on multi-stakeholder fora, how to engage. But well, it comes to an end. And before saying goodbye, I want to thank my colleagues who have been able to make this happen. You know very well Noemi, who is always there, making sure that everything works. Eva Hernandez, who is always encouraging us to participate, organizing workshops. We are still working with you. The project ends in July, so you will still, those of you following more closely the workshops, you will still be engaged with her. Rina Guadagnini is not here. Yes, you are there. Thanks to Rina for managing all the project. She's also mostly behind the scenes. And then my colleague Beatriz Ortiz, who is somewhere today also. She's the comms person and also helping. So yeah, thanks for having followed us during these 12 webinars. Has been 2.5 years. And well, as I said, we are very persistent and we will keep inviting you, although not in the frame of this workshop. And before leaving, we have to thank the Swedish Chemicals Agency for providing the support to be able to organize all these webinars. So if they want to say goodbye to you, seeing you if you want to turn on your cameras, and we can just say not goodbye, but until the next time.
Thank you.
So goodbye.
Just wanted
Thank you.
to add thank you so much to Dolo as well for participation in the project.
Thank you.
And to
Thank
Bea
Bye,
as
guys.
Thank
well.
you, everybody.
Thanks, EB team. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See
Thank
you
you all
soon.
very much.
Thanks you.
Take
Bye
care.
bye. Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.
So, EB team, shall we discuss
Yes.
briefly in our Teams link?
Okay, so I will close the meeting for everyone now.
Let's
See
go.
you on the other side, and thank you again, everyone.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye bye.